So today we are going to talk about positioning your service as the go-to company in your niche. I want to get into how one becomes the go-to company. And so I want to introduce a concept that I learned from you, what you call the why conversation.
There's three types. There's the first one is why this, and the second one is why now, and the third one is why me. And I go through these questions to essentially validate to myself that there's a project here. I'm not just going to be like, oh, these people are thinking about writing me a check. I need to figure out how to get it. You know, it's not like that at all. I view them as, I start from the very beginning viewing them as someone who I care about, and I don't want to take their money if I'm not going to deliver really high customer satisfaction. I want to deliver 100% customer satisfaction on every project. So it helps to start off by making sure I know that I agree that it's a good idea to do the project at all. So I'll say, well, why do you want to do this? Like, why is this the thing that's going to solve your problem that you just described to me? And they'll almost always have an answer for this, but not always. Sometimes they'll sit back and say, well, geez, you know, my boss told me to find someone like you to do this. And that's not a great answer. But a lot of times they'll say something that's, you know, that like, you know, we need to do this because, you know, I'll say, why do this big software project when you could just hire more people to do this manually? And they'll say, well, we've done that, but we've grown to a certain point and we can't grow anymore. We have to rent a new building, or we want to scale up 10x and we can't scale up people 10x, something like that. So then I'll get to a point through conversation where I'm convinced that the software project that they want me to consult on is actually a good idea, that it is the right solution. At least it seems like the obvious solution.
Okay.
And then I'll say, okay, we'll move on to these why now questions. You know, why do you have to do this now? Why is this urgent? Is it urgent? Is this something that a situation you could study for 6 months and put it off as long as possible? This is going to be expensive and risky and time consuming, and your employees are going to be working on this with me in addition to whatever their normal job is. So is this really the right time? And they will, you know, they'll either say, you're right, we could wait 6 months, or but they usually won't. They'll say something like, well, that would be great, but our main competitor just released this new thing and they're making a push into our space and we're nervous, or maybe there's some event coming up. Maybe they've got something that they need to have ready for the Olympics, or maybe they're trying to expand into a new country or new territory before new regulations come into play. So there's usually going to be some kind of urgency, or they wouldn't have called in the first place, where they're like, yeah, we need this yesterday, never mind in 6 months. So I find out it's important for me to be capturing the language and knowing what their reasoning is. I don't want to just know that it is urgent. I want to know why it's urgent. And once I'm satisfied that it is actually urgent, then I'll move on and say, why would you hire someone expensive like me? I'm probably the most expensive person you're going to talk to. Couldn't you just do this with internal people? You mentioned on the phone call that you have some internal software talent. Why not have them do it? And they'll say, well, they're too busy, or they haven't got we would have to, sort of train them. They haven't got the skills. We need an expert to nail this the first time. We don't get a second chance at this. We'll say, okay, well, why not outsource this to somebody in a lower cost of living country where they don't have to, they're probably going to not charge as much as paying. They say, we tried that, but the time zone, the language barrier, there were problems. So basically, I'm raising every possible objection with these three questions and going through it convinces me that it's a good idea for them to hire me, and it convinces them that it's a good idea for them to hire me. There's a good fit. And if we get to the end of that conversation and there's not a good fit, or I just don't understand, it's just not connecting, I don't see how they're going to get any positive ROI out of what I would likely charge them for some kind of engagement, I'll just come right out and say, like, this has been great talking to you folks. I understand that you've got something going on here, but I'm just not seeing the business case for you to write me a big check to help you with this. Like, what am I missing here? And sometimes that'll sort of shake loose something that is so obvious to them that they failed to mention it because it's so clear to them in their minds that it doesn't, they imagine that it's obvious to me too. So once we get to a point where everybody's in agreement that there's a good fit and it makes sense to take the next step, then I'll put together a proposal. And we could talk about what the proposal looks like, but that's the basics of the why conversation.
Now, I've seen you on other interviews get asked this question. I just want to ask it too, because I see the frequency of this question being asked to you, so I want my audience in on it.
Yep.
What if you're not at that level where you and I are at, where we can be very selective with who we choose to work with and who we don't choose to work with, right? And I think a lot of folks feel like they need the next job.
Sure.
And so there may be some people in the audience going, this sounds great in theory, but I need every job I can freaking get.
Right.
So how do I come across on the call like take it or leave it?
Right. It's really hard to have a why conversation when you don't know how you're going to make your next rent payment. So it's important to have some sort of keep the lights on money, as I call it, so that you'll have the confidence to walk away from a deal that you can clearly see is not a good fit. I mean, who in your audience hasn't had the experience of having a project blow up in their face, just have a nightmare client, and looking back on it and saying, I kind of knew. It does come back to making sure that you're working with people who really want to work with you and trying to talk them out of it. And there's a lot of things going on there, but the idea is that if you don't know how you're going to put food on the table, it's pretty tough to have the confidence in an interview like this to try and talk them out of working with you. So, but how do you get started? That's the thing. So you need to have some sort of financial security, some sort of either it's some savings or you cut your expenses.
Sorry, I'm going to add to that. So I have a pretty strong presence on Instagram, right? So once a year in the beginning of the year, I usually put together this growth class, right? It's done on Zoom. It's a webinar. It's typically $200 for the live, and then I sell the recording for $150. And it's a decent turnout, right? I'm not making a gazillion dollars off of it, but I love to teach. I love the atmosphere of a group setting, especially online. I don't have to leave my house, right? And then what happens is I take that recording and I just put it on my website underneath my digital products section. And now I go on to sell that for the rest of the year at $150 a pop.
Sure.
Until, I do the next one, right? So folks, it's not hard to start generating money and passive income too, which is what Jonathan is saying. If you're that good at what it is that you do, grab Zoom, record yourself teaching, throw up a landing page or use ClickFunnels like I do, throw up a sales page and sell that puppy.